comes to conflict. I really do not resonate with the war metaphor when even us as an in-group talk about whatever it is out there that we're trying to win against or campaign against, or even the idea of a revolution in most people's minds. Whether or not they can connect to it, they think of something like the French Revolution. They think of violence on some level. And I think the new metaphor is what Kyle was talking about. Regenerative agriculture. Who here has seen The Biggest Little Farm? I think The Biggest Little Farm is the most potent mythopoetic metaphor for how to integrate gods.
Yes.
I hope you guys will rewatch it after I try to give this breakdown, but they buy a piece of land and the soil is ruined and nothing is growing there. The default expectation for what to do with that land is to monocrop the fuck out of it, put up your walls, buy your fertilizer, just extract and exploit and try to produce as much as you possibly can and then sell it to the masses. But because they had access to a crazy wisdom mentor, this mentor taught them how to revitalize this land. And the first thing that they had to do was they had to heal the soil by putting shit and piss back into it. And then once they started to get the soil going, they were able to bring in the first wave of plants and animals. And once they started to set, predators came in, either fungi or an insect or an animal predators. And their first response to those incoming predators was to try to do something to kill them or to remove them. But what their mentor taught them is, now that you've created level 1, you start to bring in more diversity. And then instead of attacking, you add something intelligently that starts to create a new equilibrium with the new thing that you just brought in. If I knew I was going to talk about this before today, I would have rewatched it so I could give you the exact examples. But let this be an invitation for you to go watch that documentary again. But so what they do is, you create equilibrium that creates life. It draws in new creatures, and then that becomes an invitation to add a new thing to it until you get to a point where there's tens of thousands of animals and insects and plants, and it's a thriving ecosystem that moves from something that needs to be stewarded by humans to eventually getting to a place where it's doing its own infinite game, where the humans could disappear and the regenerative aspect of the land starts to take care of itself. I think we have in each of us an internal landscape, and the animals and the plants and the fauna are the ideas that we interact with. Most people we know who identify with an ism are monocropping their inner landscape. The invitation to anyone here who wants to be a part of the next generation of how ideas interact with each other. The invitation is for you to cultivate inside of you a regenerative ecosystem for ideas. So if you only identify with the left, you're monocropping, baby. If you only identify with the right, you're monocropping. One of the things that I'm most passionate about is, how do we integrate all of the different gods that are alive in our time and see what they do when they can find equilibrium with each other. But to that point, you also gotta know what weeds to pull, where to have realistic boundaries, Like one of the beautiful things about The Biggest Little Farm is they get to a point where they start to have a coyote problem. And their mentor has passed by this point. So now they're trying to put the external mentor inside of themselves, and they're trying to figure out, how do we deal with the coyotes? And the husband of the two shoots one and kills one. And he's going through this inner turmoil about whether or not the mentor that they loved would have agreed with what he had done. And this is something that I think is a obstacle that each of us will have to try to navigate when it comes to, sometimes there are ideas that actually you can't homeostasis them out. Like, we've evolved to have anger, and anger when integrated is our boundary. You know, like if Aubrey talks about this often, and it really resonates with me, and it's, if a man breaks into my home and is trying to attack my children or my wife, I can both see that I could be him if I grew up with the same environment and genetics that he has, and I can put him on the ground, and if I need to, I can kill him. And so there is a place for integrated anger. You know, there's this idea in English common law, minimal necessary force as well. And so when we go back out, you're gonna meet people who have monocropped inner soil. And it's almost like they're not gonna be able to contend or deal with the ideas and the shimmer that you'll be bringing back. Who here has seen, I think it's called Dr. Sleep, but it's the book after The Shining. The idea is that young people with the gift have the shimmer, and these eternal vampiric style entities seek them out and try to, you know, extract their shimmer. You're gonna meet people that feel like that. And there is a model that I want to offer to everyone to actually try to give you some pragmatic and practical tools that you can use to cultivate your inner garden. And when it comes to speaking to people that you don't agree with, when it comes to commenting on someone's post on social media, who here has seen a post on social media and got triggered by it, and then went in the comments and said some shit that you would never say in person ever? I invite you to be honest and brave. 30% of you are lying, and I appreciate the 10% who rose their hand. What's more common is, who here has seen a post on Instagram or Twitter that was someone on one of the side of the monocrop explicitly mocking or attacking or name calling someone on the other side, and you reposted it as a story or as a post on your Instagram or Twitter? Raise your hand. 50% of you are lying, and the 20% who raised your hands, I really appreciate that. The place where our gods are competing most often right now are on social medias. And how we use our social media is literally how we're in real time gardening our inner garden, where all of the gods are living and trying to find their place. And so I'm gonna offer a practical game that you guys can play once you leave here and you go out into the world. The first one is straw manning. Straw manning is an ancient philosophical rhetorical technique where, when you're arguing with someone and you don't agree with them, you misrepresent their argument in the most dismissive, derogatory, mocking fashion, you attack and destroy that, and then use that as evidence that you've actually dismissed their idea. Everyone here does this. It seems to be just so deeply embedded in how gods fight. And it gets us nowhere. It actually moves us closer to conflict and war. It deepens the ruptures in the social fabric. It creates more pain in people, and it keeps us from ever actually growing or learning or adding any type of biodiversity to our inner landscape. I just want you guys to know what straw manning is so that you can catch yourself when you do it, because we all do it. The next level of inner regenerative God tending would be steel manning. Who here has heard of the term steel manning? Cool. Steel manning is a modern name given to a very old philosophical idea that's called the principle of charity. And steel manning / the principle of charity is to assume the person who I do not agree with, the person who I'm having this debate or this argument with, they're fundamentally a good person. They care about their family. They care about the well-being of their children and their children's children. They're trying to get it right, and they know something that I don't know. And if I'm willing to listen to them, I might learn something that can help me help my children and my children's children if I was willing to actually contend with their idea. And from a regenerative inner God-tending landscape, that would be you actually allow that organism into your garden. And so what steel manning looks like is fundamentally, you gotta ask questions. If you meet an idea that you don't agree with, and you begin with telling them either what you believe or why they're wrong, you have already shown that you're not steel manning. Because the truth is, you've lived with yourself your whole life and you don't know who the fuck you are or what you actually think. And so when you're arguing with someone and you assume you know their position, just feel into the absolute impossible arrogance of that. You don't. But what you could do is ask some fucking questions. Genuinely. Like, what is it that you actually believe about this piece, and this piece, and this piece? You know that you've steel-manned when you can say their position back to them and they agree with you that you got it right. Who here has had a debate or a disagreement with someone where they said back the other person's position and the other person told them, you understand what I'm saying? Whoa, cool. The few times that I've done this in my life, they almost begin to cry. I remember a very vivid story when I was in college, and I was the philosopher stoner of the friend group. And we would go in my garage every night, like 5 or 6 of us, and we would smoke weed and we would just talk about whatever. One of the nights, one of my roommates' friends came over and she brought her boyfriend who was a veteran. And, you know, we were smoking weed and we were talking about all the things, and he and I got on like war and guns. And this was back when I was embarrassingly monocropped, left-winged, and before I even knew what he thought, I knew that I disagreed with him. But I could also feel how he was like on the verge of crying even as we began to talk about it. And I think that he could feel that, you know, my mind was a bit quicker than his, and he was probably worried that maybe he would be embarrassed. And it softened me in a way where I actually just started to ask him like what he really thought, what brought him to the military, why did he believe what he believed. And we got to a point where, and I had never done this before, it just kind of organically came about. I was like, so is this how you see it? And I laid it out, and he started to cry. And he said, yes. And I started to cry, and I didn't even know why I was crying. I think it's because this man that was such, you know, it's like when we see Kyle cry. It's like, this man could kill me. And he's crying in a way that like opens my heart. And for some reason, the fact that he can kill me opens my heart more. And I don't really get that, but that's what I felt from this man, and it has stuck with me for a long time. And so I invite you guys that whenever, especially when you're talking with your family, like most of you are gonna have someone in your family that when you leave this and go back to them, they're gonna be ready to attack you with their gods about why what you just did was either weird or wrong. We've been doing this game enough to know that this is one of the main things that people come back to us after these events and be like, how do we do this? Steel manning. Instead of going directly into defending yourself or attacking them for like, you don't see me and I just have to have this boundary and I won't talk to you for 6 months because I read a book about making boundaries, I'm just gonna cut you off. What you could do is just from a place of non-reactivity, really, just like Aubrey was talking about with Arkadia, get inside of their reality tunnel, get inside of their story by asking genuine questions so you can explore every nook and cranny about why they believe what they believe. Instead of just going straight for the jugular and be like, you're terrified of intimacy, and what I do makes you feel uncomfortable. And when you're ready to dance and hug, I'll be here with open arms. Maybe don't do that. I've tried it doesn't work. The third level, the highest level of this type of regenerative God tending is what I'm playing with calling heart manning. And heart manning is where you steel man to the depth where you're able to connect to what is the grief in the other person that they are defending with their gods and their stories, and not as a tool to use to manipulate them, but to be in it with them, where tears are coming down your face as you're speaking to your mother or your father about this experience, because you can connect to their terror of being judged, or their terror of losing themselves in the collective, or the fact that their mother, who has already passed, the image of their mother is still so strong in their mind that they've never gone for their dreams, and to even begin to hope is actually more painful than to just slowly die. I have someone in my family that is their story. That the idea of hope is so much more painful than them just being like, I'm just gonna slowly die for the next 8 years. And just to be with them. Because fundamentally, what I feel is at the core of most of our disagreements is we have grief that has not been witnessed by the people closest to us, that if it was witnessed by them, we would all be closer together. I'll share a story. Damn, I only have 2 minutes? Whoa, okay. I'm gonna go a little bit over because Kyle did, right? All right. So I'm gonna share a personal story, and then I'm gonna get weird with the mythic thing. For the last, so I got into this self-help, really I got into the idea of, oh my God, I'm more than just a cog in a machine, about 12 years ago. And as I started to learn about how to change my diet and how to journal and how good going on walks are and getting in the sun and all that shit, every time I would talk to my mom, I would try to give her these tools that I thought would help make her life better. And she interpreted my advice giving as me judging her, and it got to the point where after about a year and a half, she would stop calling me. And I eventually found out that, she told me, and she said, it doesn't feel good when I talk to you on the phone because I just feel like I'm doing everything wrong. And that was heartbreaking. That wasn't yet heartbreaking, I'll get to the heartbreak part. She came to visit when I was still in college, and we went out to dinner, and my mom's very philosophical, she's very intelligent, she loves to read, and she loves to play with ideas, and we got to the point where she was basically like, so you're telling me that everything that's wrong in my life is my fault? And I said yes, and I could see that saying yes, that was the thing that I said that hurt my mother more than anything that I've ever said or ever done to her. She went straight to crying. We were in a public restaurant. I could feel, it was almost like I had punched her in the stomach. She got up and she went outside, and it took, maybe 10 or 15 minutes until she eventually came back inside. And she apologized for how she reacted, and I apologized for saying it, but every year when I would visit for Christmas, we would somehow find ourselves back in that place where she would be like, you think you're fucking better than me? You think that she basically was holding on to that one moment that she used as proof that her son thought that she was a piece of shit. And I would always fight with her when we would get to that point. I'd be like, no, I don't fucking think that. And we'd get into these shouting matches. This past Christmas, we got back to that spot, just like every year. This is our favorite song. And because of doing the things that I have been doing at Fit for Service, I have taught my nervous system how to be clear and calm when it's super activated. I think that's one of the best gifts. One of the things that Fit for Service does, or just any event like this, is you get to practice being in a fully charged nervous system and still have to have your fucking wits about you. And doing the sweat lodges and the ecstatic dances and the breath work and the weird tribal games that we did and the fucking Spartan runs that we do. I could feel that for the first time. I was able to be in the full triggered boy of the mother who's disappointed in you, who is weeping and yelling. And that my response to that my entire life was to fight or to freeze and to run. I was able to stand in her grief and her pain, and I was able to track in my mind. I had the whole philosophical argument about why she was wrong right here. And I wanted to click it. And I had this moment where it was like, I'm gonna try this thing. And what I did is, I dropped into her grief with her. My eyes started to water. I looked her in the eyes and I said, sorry. And I noticed it was the first time that I just said sorry instead of defend myself. And my mom, her whole energy changed. And we went on to have a great conversation, and I was able to notice in hindsight my resistance to her was to drop into the frequency of her grief. And all of my arguments and all of my words was to avoid being in the frequency of the grief of the person in front of me. And I think most of our cultural war dialogue is between two people with grief about something and the unwillingness of the other person to drop into their grief. Because 99.99% of the cultural war discussions are happening by people who don't even have the technical skills to do anything about the thing that they're arguing about. It's like, if your partner is yelling about the dishes, it's almost never about the dishes. And that's what I see is happening. Like, most of the people that I know don't do a goddamn thing in politics, and the ones who talk about it the most clearly have some part of their dharma that they are not yet pursuing, and they use political arguments or conspiracy theories to protect themselves from trying. Okay, I'm gonna end with a myth. I've been trying to contend with the feeling that we're in a cultural war. And I told you I don't like the war metaphor, but it also feels naive not to use it if it's the one that best applies to what's happening. And I like to think in mythological terms. It's almost like in order for my brain to remember things, I have to imagine them like a 7-year-old would imagine, like, there's a castle over there, and there's a bear in the woods, and there's a dragon. And I use those as like inner landmarks for big ideas that I like to try to travel with. And I have this vision of this like huge titan, like the father of the gods. And it's like his body is the whole landscape of the continent. And there's like a broken down castle in his ribs. And that's where all of his sons and daughters, the gods of our time, are gathered around a table. And they're all fighting with each other about who father was worse to. Every one of us, when we think about this titan, somewhere in our history, we were one of the tribes that this titan conquered. Just some of us have been integrated into the body of this titan longer. And it's like the newest, the youngest sons and daughters of this titan's conquest. They're at the table trying to express their grief. And the older sons and daughters don't want to hear it. And it's like we're not allowing, we're in his ribs, screaming about who dad abused more. That's at least what it feels like to me on a mythical level. And I think that the only way that we're going to figure out what to do with the body and the landscape and the good ideas that this titan is leaving behind is someone is going to have to step to the table and help people begin to process and share their grief. And so my invitation to all of you is to play the game of trying to tend to the inner garden in your heart and to allow new gods in and see what type of beautiful landscape that you can make through steel manning and heart manning. And please to take responsible that your speech, your conversations, your communication, everything you write and repost and share online is contributing to the soil of the zeitgeist. You are responsible, and we can do it. And the beautiful thing about life, and what Kyle's talk shows explicitly, is if you give it the container and the ingredients, the magic occupies it and it grows. Like, we don't know how to grow things. We know how to set the container for the mystery to come through it and make life. Like, we don't heal our own cuts. We don't know how the fuck that works. We have the symbols that we can apply to it, and we can put it on a test, and you can pass the test, and we can give you a title, but we don't actually know. And so the invitation is to garden your inner zeitgeist. Thank you.